Welcome to another episode of Seeing Conversations, where we talk about life, identity, purpose, and faith. We have real honest conversations, and I have a very, very special guest with me here today. I have a lot of respect for this young lady. This is not a highlight version, but the process that we don't always see when we talk about having a journey to redemption. So that's going to be our topic for tonight, the journey of redemption. And I've got none other than Miss Jerica Lopez. How you doing today?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Doing great, great. I thank you for taking the time out with us today. I appreciate you joining us, and we'll go ahead and knock this conversation on out. So if you can, tell me a little bit about who you are and about yourself and the journey you've kind of been on.
Okay. I'd say that I am someone who was shaped by love, loss, and a lot of growth. I wouldn't say that I had the most consistent relationship with a dad. You know, they say that a daughter's first love is their father. I didn't have that. I had a tribe of women, is what I call it. I was raised by my mom, my grandmother, and one of my aunts, where my mom fell short. The other two picked it up without even asking. Um, but within the last, it's 26, so I was 5 years, I lost two of three members of my tribe, which really shaped who I was. I had this whole trajectory in my head of I was going to go to college. When I graduated, I was working at a dealership. I was on their management plan. I was going to go from being, a sales manager to a business office manager to I was going to own my own store. And the loss of them completely changed that trajectory for me.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot. You're very resilient based on the journey you've been on. I couldn't imagine, having those challenges. I will say that I can definitely relate, to having challenges with male figures in my life and things like that. Me and my dad, we don't have the best relationship.
Yeah.
So I could definitely relate to that. And I appreciate you being transparent about that. Let me ask you this question. So when people see you now, they may see strength or growth. What is something that they do not see?
They don't see what it took to get here. Losing the two main people, the main pillars of my tribe. My grandmother was the glue that held my family together. If it wasn't for her, truly, I don't know where I'd be today. But then turning around and then 4 years later, losing my mom, people think, oh, grief, she picked herself back up and kept moving. But what a lot of people don't see is after my mother passed, what happened. I'm a completely different person from 2023, 2024 that I am in 2026.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I lost my grandmother at the age of 7, and it impacted me for a very long time. And it's tough to get over. I couldn't imagine, losing a parent. So yeah, I understand what loss is, significant loss, but couldn't imagine losing a parent, at an early age. So again, I appreciate your resilience and your growth, and who you are today.
Thank you.
So was there a moment or a season when things kind of went off track or did not align with who you were meant to be?
I would say the end of 2023 up until 2024. September, I'll never forget the date, September 15th, 2023. Worked a normal shift at the dealership. At the time, my mom was living with me, so I came home. chit-chatted with her. She was like, "Oh, hey, I know you have to work a late shift tomorrow. Let's get up and have breakfast." And I was like, "Absolutely. Let's," my mom and I were best friends. A lot of people laughed and said we were more like sisters than we actually were mother and daughter. That's because she had me at an early age, and basically we grew up together. Um, Laughed and joked. I went to bed. My bedroom is upstairs. Hers was downstairs. The next morning, I remember her telling me that night, she's like, "I'm gonna get up at 6 or at 7:30. I'll wake you up at 8." And I was like, "That's perfect. That gives us time to have breakfast, relax before both of us have to be at work." And I remember waking up that next morning, getting going to the bathroom and thinking, "Man, I feel like I've slept past what time I need to." Walk back to my room, check my phone, and it says it's 8:30. And I'm like, 8:30? That's weird. She said she was going to wake me up at 8. And I remember walking down my stairs. I got halfway down the stairs and the air was just thick. My mom was one of those people that she was an early riser. I used to laugh and say she was up before the hens. The wash machine would normally be going, the radio, the TV, the stove. You would hear everything in my house when she was here. But that morning I heard nothing. So I walked in her bedroom and come to find out she had had multiple seizures in the middle of the night. And I, being upstairs, did not hear her. Um, Called 911, got her to the hospital. Come to find out she had a form of brain cancer called glioblastoma, which is automatic stage 4. There's no stage 1, stage 2. It is an automatic stage 4. And at that point in my life, I'm like, I'm 33. I'm now going to have to take care of my 34-year-old mother, who is the epitome of health. I mean, this woman would get up at 4:30 every morning, go to the gym, run 2 or 3 miles, and then turn around and go to work. What is my life going to be like? And thankfully, I had a team that rallied behind me. My best friend, my aunt, I had an aunt that was like, what do you need from us? We got you. Um, I became my mom's primary caregiver. She lost complete mobility in her left side, so she wore a sling with her arm in it at all times. She walked with a cane because she drug her left foot. Um, and before that, I was on the path of the next level of management within that dealership. I had put in my time, I was doing the work, I was ready for that. And I put all of that on hold to become her primary caregiver. I ended up taking the 12 weeks that they give you with FMLA, took that time off, stayed with her for that, trying to figure out what our next steps were. Were we going to do radiation and chemo? Were we not? What we were going to do? And when I went back to work, I remember my very first day, I walked into my location manager's office and I was like, "All right, I'm back to work. I'm ready to get back on the path. I've got to do this." And he looked at me and said, "You're not ready." And I was like, "What do you mean I'm not ready? I've done the work. I've put in the time. I'm ready to do this." And he said, "You're not ready." And to me, I looked at that as God saying, I'm closing this door for you for a reason. I think I worked another month, month and a half, and I walked in on a Friday night, and I looked at him and I said, I'm putting in my 2 weeks. I don't know what my next steps are from here, but I'm being told something in my bones and my gut is telling me that this is, my time to go. And he was like, "What can we do? How can we make this better?" And I said, "There is nothing, absolutely nothing that you can do to make this better for me." And I walked out of what I thought was going to be my career for life.
Wow. Wow. That's a lot to unpack there. So we got more in common than I thought. So my mother had me at an extremely early age. She was 14 when she had me. So I definitely know what it feels like to grow up with a parent, when she was a young adult, I was a teenager, things like that. So we basically saw each other grow up over time. But I can't imagine what you went through during that time with your mother's illness. So when I know you said God, you felt like that was God stepping in, and sometimes He'll show up in the strangest of ways, before you realize it. So my question from that is the next step or path that you took. Do you feel like that was the right path after you left that position?
Oh yeah. So I took a couple months off, just caring for her, going to chemo, going to radiation. And during that time, she kept laughing and saying, "You need to go into HR." I was like, "I'm not going into HR." And she was like, "Baby, I'm telling you, HR is your next step." She said, "You have a degree in it. People love you. You are basically a mini me." She's like, "You might look like your dad, but you are basically a mini me." And I'm like, I'm not going into HR, Mom. You're crazy. I'm not doing that. So I remember I took a job at a doing claims adjusting, and I was like, why am I doing this? I absolutely hate this job. This job I'm miserable at every day. And I woke up, my mom passed in that December of 24. I remember March of 25, 20, yeah, 25. I woke up and my husband, then boyfriend, I looked at him on a Sunday and I said, I have the Sunday scaries. I have so much anxiety. I cannot go to work. And he's like, "It's Sunday. Why are we even worried about work? Stop worrying about work. Get over it." And he's like, "If you feel that bad, call in the next day. Take a mental health day." And I was like, "Okay." So I remember I called in that Monday and I took a mental health day. Actually, I called and told her I was sick. And by 12 o'clock, I was calling my boss and saying, "I'm quitting this job." And she was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. How about take some take short-term leave, you came straight back to work after your mom died, maybe you just need to take short-term leave." And I was like, "All right, I'll do whatever y'all think is going to work. If you think short-term leave is what I need to do, I'll take short-term leave." And she's like, "All right, I'll get you in touch with HR." They walked me through the process. And the next day, I immediately started looking for a new job. I remember telling him, I was like, "I don't know why," I said, "but I keep having this feeling that I need to apply for HR jobs." And he's like, "I mean, you have a background in, you have a background in it. You kind of were the HR manager at the dealership, even though you're a sales manager. You said your mom kept telling you needed to go into it. Like, is that what it is?" And I was like, "I don't know, but something is calling me to go into HR." And I remember I went all March, got a couple interviews, but nothing that really panned out. He told me, "Hey, for your birthday, we're just going to get out of town. We're going to go to Nashville. We're going to have a good time. Let's go have some fun." And I was like, "Absolutely." And on our way to Nashville, I'm checking my email, looking, and one of the jobs I had applied for an HR generalist, had emailed me and said, "Hey, we want to do an interview next week." And him and I had already, my birthday is on the 14th. Him and I had already planned to stay till like the 15th or 16th. And they're like, "We're doing interviews on the 15th." And I told him, I said, "We're cutting this trip short. I have an HR generalist job that has reached out. We're coming home to do this interview." And he's like, "If that's what you really want to do, let's do it." And I remember walking into my interview and thinking, "God, this is not, what am I doing with myself? Like, I'm crazy. What am I doing?" And it was the most calm I have ever been in an interview in my entire life. And I walked out and I was like, I didn't get that job. I did terrible at this interview." And I remember the whole week, my aunt's like, "Did you get a call? Did they call you? I think you got the job." And I was like, "I didn't get the job. I don't know why you're bugging me." And I remember it was like a week later, I got the call that I got the job. And I remember calling her. Actually, she was at my house and I called him at work and I was like, "Hey, guess what? I got that HR journalist job." And he was like, "Your mom." And that's
Yeah.
all he said was, "Your mom." And I was like, "Yep, that was Leslie's sign to She always told me, step out there on faith. You never know what happens. And that was one time that I stepped out there on faith, and I was like, I'm just gonna let go and let God, and whatever happens is what happens.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's the definition of alignment, So yeah, shout out to you for taking that step. And it sounds like you got a very supportive boyfriend and now husband. How did he help you shift your perspective during your difficult time?
So, funny story, he never actually even got to meet my mom. I met him, my best friend got married on my mom's birthday of 24. I flew home on that Sunday. That next Friday, I met him for the very first time. We had matched on a dating app a year before that, right before my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And we talked on and off, but we had never met. And when I was in Orlando for my best friend's wedding, he was like, "Are we ever going to meet?" And I laughed and said, maybe at some point. And he was like, I don't think we are. So I took that as a personal challenge of I now have to meet this man. And after I met him for the first time, I literally spent almost every Saturday with him. Saturday was my free day. That was the day my aunt would come and sit with my mom all day and just be like, "You need to get out of the house. You've been with her all week. Go have some you time." Um, and I remember the day I called him and that she had passed. My mom's death date is actually his mom's birthday. And I called him and said, "Hey, you probably won't hear much from me today. My mom just passed." And he said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, I mean, I'm as okay as you can possibly be. My family are here. I have a couple friends that are coming over after work just to check in. And he's like, "If you need anything, you let me know." At the time, he was living in Cincinnati, I in Georgetown. We're an hour apart. So I'm like, I'm not going to hear from this man at all. And I remember he texted me that night and said, "Hey, what's your address?" And me not thinking about it, I sent him my address. And within an hour and 10, he texted me and said, "I'm in your driveway." What? What? No, you're not. So I opened my front door, and sure enough, he was sitting in my driveway. And he said, "Look, something in me just would not let me be until I came and physically put eyes on you and checked on you." And I was like, okay. So everybody had left by that time, so I was here by myself. And he sat here with me for about an hour. And when it came time for him to leave, he said, "Either you're coming with me or I'm staying here. I cannot leave you alone tonight." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So the entire week, I would literally come home, do whatever I needed to do for her services. And then at the end of the night, when I knew he was on his way home from work, I would drive back to Cincinnati so that I wasn't at home all week by myself. And this man, who has never met any of my friends, never met any of my family, never met my mom, actually attended my mom's funeral with me. The whole time he was checking in. "Do you need water? Here's tissues." I mean, it was like I laughed and told someone it was like having my own personal bodyguard. Like, this man literally was in a chair as close to me as he could possibly get without being right next to me. And after she passed, he was like, "Look, I know what you're going through." He had actually lost his dad to cancer when he was 16. So he's like, "I know what you're going through. I understand it. You're going to have highs, you're going to have lows. But what I'm not going to allow you to do is just lay in the bed and rot. You said your mom wanted you to live life. I'm going to make sure you live life." And I'm like, okay, this man's full of it. I didn't believe any of it. But he has definitely done that. I have traveled, been in more states, seen more things in a short year and a half that I have been with him than I have in 35 years of life. My mom wanted me to see the world. This man made sure for our honeymoon that we went to Bali. She wanted me to follow the path of being in HR. This man made sure, he's like, "This is what you need to do." Even when her death anniversary came up, he was like, "What you're not going to do today is wallow in self-pity and grief. What you're going to do is you're going to get out of this house. You're going to go do something that she would have enjoyed." He's like, "I don't care if you go sit in her favorite bakery. Get out of this house." And I laugh and tell him all the time, he is exactly what my mom used to tell me that she prayed that I would find in a husband.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. So it sounds like you made a lot of changes, whether it be mentally, spiritually, and or with your environment, and he was a huge part of that. Uh, Let me ask you this question: how do you feel like with all the challenges you've kind of been through in your experiences, how do you feel like that reshaped your understanding of what identity is?
It made me completely reevaluate my identity. In my head, I was this daughter who did it any and everything for her mom. I was this sales manager who was always there for my work kids. I mean, I called my sales team my work kids because it was like having a bunch of kids all the time. I mean, I had to the point that they would call me outside of work to ask me different things. Um, and then when all of that disappeared, it was a rediscovery of who I was. I didn't have those things to lean and depend on anymore. It was, who is Jerica? What does Jerica want? Why does Jerica want this? And just rediscovering completely who I was. I was no longer the person I thought I was. It was changing that completely.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. So obviously this podcast is called Scene Conversation. So part of what scene means is it's an acronym. So seen, equipped, empowered, and needed. That's what it stands for. What does that word mean to you today?
For me, seen means not being afraid. I was always I was always the one who would stand back. I never wanted to jump out there and do anything. I never wanted to, as I always laugh and tell people, ruffle my family's feathers. Because I'm my mom was the baby, I'm the baby's baby. So it was always like having 20 parents that, you know, Jerka can't do this, she can't, we have to keep her in our little bubble. And since then, it has been, I am, what can I do? How can I change this? Whether it's at home, at work, um, like getting on the plane to go to Bali for our honeymoon. My family was like, "You are not going to Bali." And I was like, "I absolutely am going to Bali. I don't care what y'all think." Um, Getting on a plane to go different places. I've been to New York and New Jersey and Tennessee and Massachusetts and Maryland and just a lot of places that I saw on the map I had never been. I was always afraid to leave my bubble, leave my zone. I always told people I was going to live, breathe, and die Kentucky. It's even one of those things that, my husband has now said it at some point, when we have kids and they're older, maybe let's move to the East Coast where he's from, and venture out life there, or we've got friends in Tennessee, or not Tennessee, in Texas. Let's go to Texas and live for a little bit. So it's one of those things. Like I said, I always said I was going to live, breathe, and die Kentucky, and now I'm like, let's venture out of that. Let's see what the world has for me.
That's amazing. All right. So in one sentence, in one sentence, what do you want people to remember after hearing your story?
Um, I want people to remember that even though loss, love, heartache is part of your story, don't let it define your story. You are 100% worthy, and your story has a purpose for a reason.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your story is going to help a whole lot of people, once they see this episode. I thank you so much for having the courage and the resilience to spend some time with me today. This has been very insightful and impactful for me as well. Um, I learned some things, right? We got a few more things in common, so I
Right.
appreciate that. Um, but again, thank you again, Jerica. I really do appreciate your time today.
You're welcome.
Yep. And this is another episode of Seeing Conversations, where we talk about life experiences, identity, purpose, and faith. This is Stephen Miller, the host of the show. Have a blessed day.